I'm Malika Bilal. Today, a check-in on 3 stories we're following closely here on the stream. China is testing a cutting-edge new plan authorities say will make it easier for citizens to do business and build trust in one another. So why are critics calling it an Orwellian nightmare? Then the Mars InSight has touched down on the red planet. What is NASA hoping to learn? But first, the G20 summit is set to begin in Argentina on Friday with some highly anticipated meetings between world leaders. So what's expected? I'll be looking for your comments on Twitter and, of course, in our YouTube chat.
U.S. President Donald Trump's first visit to South America to attend the meeting of G20 leaders in Argentina is bound to make headlines. He canceled his last trip to South America in April as the U.S. prepared to strike Syria. This time, the U.S. is embroiled in trade disputes with Europe, Canada, and China, and a border fight with Mexico, as well as a climate policy that is muddled at best. Trump will, just like the previous G20, be surrounded by leaders who have serious disagreements with him.
That's a little of what's ahead for U.S. President Trump at the G20, but other world leaders began arriving in Buenos Aires on Thursday for the summit of the globe's largest economies. But the focus is likely to be on issues not on the agenda. A trade war between the United States and China, troubled relations between member states, and the presence of the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He's been accused by Human Rights Watch of war crimes in Yemen and the murder of newspaper columnist Jamal Khashoggi. Here to help us preview what's coming up from Buenos Aires, Kimberly Halkett is Al Jazeera's White House correspondent, and Atzi Sheikh, Managing Director in the Credit Strategy and Research Group at Moody's Investors Service. Welcome to both of you. I want to start on my laptop from a member of our community, Alex, who writes in, notice that just before leaving the White House, President Trump said it was a good time to meet Russia's Putin and changed his mind 1 hour later. Kimberly, we know that there was a meeting scheduled with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but it appears to now be off of the table. What happened?
Yeah, well, the president said as he was leaving the White House that he was going to get a full report on that naval clash that occurred between Ukraine and Russia, where as a result of that clash, there were a seizure of 3 Ukrainian ships. The sailors as well were detained. The president tweeted that he was canceling the meeting, and he did this mid-flight after leaving the White House because he said that, you know, he was not happy that, in fact, this had not been resolved. So in terms of the president saying one thing and then changing it, that is certainly true. But if you look at the full transcript of the president's comments as he left the White House, he actually said he'll probably be meeting with Putin, but he needs to get a full report on that incident and the latest situation, which we now know from the Secretary of the White House, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. He consulted with his chief of staff, he consulted Secretary of State, and also his defense secretary. And it was after that consultation, apparently, that he made the determination that it would not be appropriate to meet with Vladimir Putin. Now, why is this really interesting? It's kind of interesting because it's coming at the same time that we're having a bombshell explosion back in the United States with revelations about the Russia investigation and the president's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, pleading guilty to making false statements to federal investigators. Well, what were those statements that he was making that were so false? Well, he mischaracterized, and this is a federal crime, some conversations that he had with the president about a project, a construction project to build Trump Tower in Moscow. So this is a bombshell revelation, given the fact that it kind of links the president to Russia when he's always said there's no collusion. And now we have, on the heels of this bombshell revelation, this abrupt cancellation of the meeting with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin. So interesting times, make what you will of the developments, but we're certainly following it closely.
Interesting times is a light way to put it, because clearly the story just keeps changing by the minute. Thank you for breaking that down for us, Kimberly. I want to go to this headline, though, because there is so much that is expected to take place at the G20. This from Vox. The U.S. and China relationship is in shambles, and it could get worse at the G20. So, Atsi, we know that there is another high-stakes meeting that is planned between President Trump and the Chinese leader, Xi Jinping. What do you make of what is going to happen during that meeting?
Well, it's really difficult to tell, Malika, because there's been so much uncertainty leading up to these talks. But what we do know is, yes, the financial markets, but even beyond the financial markets, people will be watching for the outcome of that meeting. At stake really is the ongoing trade tensions between the two countries. And these are important not just to US and China, but these are the two largest economies in the world. So they're important to the world. The US has imposed a number of trade tariffs on imports from China. China has retaliated with tariffs of its own. What we know is that come January 1, the US intends to raise some of these tariffs. It has about 10% of tariffs on about 200 billion of goods that we import from China and the United States. That's going to be raised to 25%. And the hope is that there will be some discussions around these tariffs and whether they climb down from this promise to increase them, or they change, sort of agreements on something else. That's what people will be watching for.
So does that mean that you see a trade deal being reached here between China and the US?
There might well be some sort of agreement that is reached, but really from our perspective, we think that the road will be rocky for a long time to come. So the relationship between China and the US, the focus right now is on the trade tariffs, but it goes well beyond that. I think the disagreement is about trade, yes, but it's also about technology. China has been increasing its investments in technology. It's been acquiring technology companies across the world, including in the US, and this is something that the US is wary of. China has rules around investment coming in, including from the US into China. There are regulations and rules that the US thinks don't serve the interest of US companies. So that's another area where there's disagreement. And then fourth, geopolitically, China has certain interests in the South China Sea. China has a position towards Taiwan.
Right.
The US has very different positions. So I think even if there's an agreement this weekend, the relationship will be rocky in times to come.
I think we just have to jump in here, though, quickly and just explain, like when we're talking about this in sort of layman's terms, the U.S. Congress has been for years concerned about China's trading practices. It's not that Donald Trump woke up one day and said, let's pick a fight with China. This has been a concern of members of Congress, and they've even articulated as recently as in a letter in the last week to the White House, don't give in to China, don't strike an agreement at the G20 unless China ends its predatory trade practices. What do they mean by that? Intellectual property theft, flooding the U.S. market with cheap goods. These are things that the U.S. president, the U.S. Congress, which rarely agrees, they all agree that this is hurting the American consumer and could affect American prosperity long term.
Right.
So I think that you're right there. In terms of an agreement, the chances seem slim. But then again, Donald Trump has said, and his economic advisor said, look, if our concessions are made by China, then we're open to a deal.
Kimberly, of course, people are looking at that, but they are also looking at, and I dare say even more people are looking at this headline. This is the one that is on people's minds, at least online. MBS arrives in Argentina in the face of G20. Will he be a pariah? And this is looking at whether the Saudi prince, how other world leaders will react to him. We got a couple comments on that. Imran Garda, former Stream host, writes, I'd guess that Trump will use the chance and a photo op to show solidarity and categorically state his continued support for MBS. Kimberly, what do you see happening there?
Well, there's no scheduled photo op. We know that. The White House has confirmed that. But Donald Trump has continued to give plausible deniability to the Crown Prince with respect to the fact that whether or not he ordered the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, which CIA intelligence seems to suggest and has been widely reported as such. However, the recent statements coming out of the Secretary of State is that, and as well as the Secretary of Defense, that there's no smoking gun. That the intelligence, in fact, doesn't say that. Here, there's certainly the feeling, and around the world, there's the feeling that this is a very well-coordinated cover-up, and that these officials are parsing. They're certainly using careful language in order to give the Crown Prince what he needs, and that is a warm reception here. But it's unlikely that's going to happen. In fact, there have been protests here already, and certainly when it comes to the world leaders that are gathering here, this is not favorable climate for Mohammed bin Salman. So, he might be looking for that photo op, and the White House has said there's nothing formal on the schedule, but at the same time, the press secretary saying the possibility of some sort of interaction, she can't rule that out.
Kimberly Atzi, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. You can follow all of the developments at home from the G20 at aljazeera.com.
lots of the trust-breaking behavior targeted by the social credit system are simply behavior that are supposed to be regulated, but previously the relevant regulation fails to bite for a variety of reasons, mostly relating to the regulatory incapacities of authorities. Now, of course, bear in mind, China is such a large and complex society, and regulating anything in China is hard. So the social credit system seems to give people a new hope that there might be some other kind of tools that could be effective to address these regulatory deficiencies. So that's what the so-called trust deficit is understood by an average Chinese person, and also the critical reason why some survey studies tend to find strong support from the Chinese public for the social credit system.
Rewarding good behavior. China is testing a new plan aimed at making it easier for citizens to build trust in one another. In partnership with one of the country's biggest companies, Alibaba, the government is creating a system that not only tracks credit scores, but also social credit. Research shows, and you just heard in that video comment, the scheme is widely supported. So is this plan that's due to roll out in 2020 Big Brother behavior or necessary to protect consumers in one of the world's most sprawling economies? We're here to explain more. Cindy Yu is China specialist at Spectator magazine, and Mara Vistendal is an author and journalist. Welcome to the stream, ladies. I'll start with this headline here from the Washington Post because it's pretty interesting. They write, China's social credit system may be misunderstood. I wonder if you could break that down for us, Cindy. What do we know about this system as of now?
I think there are two big misunderstandings that a lot of Western commentators have been going along with in the reporting. Firstly is that the system is not in place at the moment. We have 40 trials across the country in different cities, at different scales, that are really just trialing what sort of criteria works, what sort of carrot and sticks work. That's not a nationwide thing just yet. The government is trying to make it come to life by 2020, but that's only a year away, and I'm not really seeing if that will come in time. And the second biggest misunderstanding, I think, is this sort of assumption that Chinese people are suspicious of the government. And obviously there is a lot that the government has done to the people in recent years that the Chinese people are not happy about. But culturally, philosophically speaking, the Chinese people don't really have a suspicion of authority. They are very happy to go along with authority just from this centuries old of Confucianism. There's no such thing as liberalism or the Enlightenment that happened to make people naturally suspicious of government. So when you talk to the average Chinese person about a system like this in theory, they're like, yeah, sounds good. If you've not done anything wrong, then why should you be afraid of it?
That's interesting because I'm sure that is so interesting for Western audiences to hear and to feel like they can't relate. But this tweet here from H.G. Flores, he writes in, this will lead to a social credit caste society. And furthermore, I believe China will seek to export this social model to regions in which it has influence to monitor anti-Chinese expression. So he's really taking it pretty far there, Mara. But this idea of a social credit caste system, does he have some credibility right there? Is that a thing that you foresee as well?
I think it's too early to say. And when you talk about authoritarianism, it's not really, I agree that it's not the government having a heavier hand over society. It's really about collecting information using AI, using big data, and then trying to synthesize that and come up with assessments of people. And of course that's worrying, but the average person is probably not thinking so much about the information that's being collected. And that's similar to the attitude that a lot of Westerners have toward our data.
It's interesting, though, because for so many of us, if we're connected online using mobile phones, who our friends are, where and how we pay our bills, where we go, those things are already tracked. So what do you see being different in this case, Cindy? What makes this different?
I don't think so the carrot and stick system is what makes us different. At the moment, as you say, the data is already out there in the West as well. If you go on Amazon, go on Uber, anything at all, your average day is being tracked. Even your Fitbit tracks your health. So China's not doing anything radical in that sense, but what it is doing is formalizing it into an institution that you can then delve out punishments and rewards. And what's most worrying about this, I think, is the erosion of the rule of law. What it means is that if you do something wrong in one area of life, then it can come back and bite you on another area of your life, maybe later when you've done something else that lowers your score. So we've heard stories of people whose children can't go to keynote universities because they haven't paid a debt. And that's not what the rule of law is meant to be. So it's not meant to be so holistic a punishment. But that's the worrying part that China is bringing to the system.
Some comments here from YouTube.
Yeah, I agree.
Observer.
I agree.
Mara, I just want to bring these comments in on YouTube before I go to you. Conscious Observer says China is a real-life Black Mirror, which of course echoing the TV show, the hit TV show. They say, I think it will cause an extreme divide between the law-abiding and the unruly. Mara, go ahead.
Yeah, the Black Mirror episode comes up a lot. I wrote a big feature on social credit, and particularly on one private sector system for Wired, and a number of people mentioned that and said, why did you not bring up that episode in the article? There is a difference in that episode is all about people rating each other, and it's sort of your Uber rating gone wild. And what the vision of the Chinese government is that you would have companies and local governments rating citizens. So the power structure is a bit different. I think the one aspect that I find very worrying right now is the potential for collaboration with the private sector, because China has very powerful tech companies that collect quite a lot of information on people. Just to be clear, there's not one designated partner. There is a company and financial and Alibaba that has a system that is further along than others. But there are companies that do have a lot of information on people and that have close relationships to the government, and there's a potential for that information then to be harvested and used against people.
That echoes what I'm seeing on YouTube here. Polybia says the social credit system is the same method of control that has been utilized in China for some time. It's just getting a facelift to fit into the technological age. So one person's view there. Cindy, Mara, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We are at the end of this segment, but look forward to revisiting this story. And now from China to Mars.
Touchdown confirmed.
Then, InSight's first photo from its new home, the Elysium Planitia. Using a 2-meter robotic arm, a seismometer, and other instruments, InSight will dig a hole 5 meters deep so it can record so-called Mars quakes and calculate just how hot the red planet's inner layers get. They want to understand why Mars, which once may have been habitable by life, is no longer. NASA scientists say this data will help them understand more about Mars's origins and perhaps about the Earth's as well, and boost U.S. efforts to get humans on Mars by the 2030s.
To help us understand more of InSight's mission, Stephanie L. Smith is the digital and social media lead of the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It manages InSight. Welcome back to the stream, Stephanie. I am starting here with this GIF, which you directed our team to. It shows a secret, though not so secret anymore, handshake among NASA employees. And this is that moment you can feel the joy here. It's palpable. You were in the building when this was happening. What did that feel like?
It was fantastic. Really, we made a 300 million mile touchdown. And if that doesn't deserve a touchdown celebration, I don't know what does.
How long had that been in the making? Because we know that a lot goes into that. How long has this been?
So this mission, there have been people like the principal investigator who've been thinking about parts of this for 30 years. And now it's actually happening. We've touched down safely on the red planet, and the rest of the mission can begin. As far as that handshake was concerned, the engineers told me they'd been breaking down the tape and working on it for the last 5 to 6 weeks. It's an homage to a National Football League player, American Football League player here in the United States.
That's so cool to see. I think our audience would agree. So I'm going to go to this tweet that we got from Alex, a former stream guest and also in the science community, who says, this is totally mind-blowing. How remarkable is it that we can build a robot, blow it into space, land it on another planet, and receive photos from it within hours, with data to come that will shed understanding on how our own planet came into existence. So break that down for us. What is it that we're trying to learn, and what do you think we can learn about Mars?
We've only just scratched the surface of the red planet, but InSight is going to go deep. This is going to be the first mission to ever study the deep interior of the planet. We're at the crust. We're going to go down deep with our heat flow probe. We are going to see what the internal temperature of the planet is. We're going to place a seismometer on the surface for the very first time and feel for Mars quakes. And we're also going to use radio science to feel the wobble of Mars. If you've ever spun a hard-boiled egg and a raw egg next to each other, you'll notice that they spin differently. And that's because of the solid core and the liquid core in those two eggs. Planets wobble the same way. So we're going to learn a lot more about the deep interior of this planet. It's going to tell us about rocky worlds all over the universe, really. We've studied our own Earth a lot. We've got to study the planet next door. And being able to compare and contrast those data sets is going to tell us more about how rocky planets form. It's also going to tell us maybe a little bit more about what happened to Mars. We know from the rock record that Mars used to be a very wet place with streams and lakes, and it doesn't look like that anymore. So what happened? Did that core cool off? Did it lose its atmosphere? We don't know, but that's why we're exploring.
So I want to share this tweet we got from astrophysicist and also former stream guest Katie Mack, who says this is a fantastic experiment. We're going to be able to study the interior of Mars, learn about its formation history, and possibly its potential for subsurface life. And I love the fact that it was accompanied by the first interplanetary CubeSat. So when she says about the things that she's excited about learning, what do you think, for our layperson audience here who may not be astrophysicists, what then can this tell us about the solar system as a whole? Anything?
Wow, if we find life somewhere beyond Earth, that tells us that the potential for life could be everywhere. And how InSight fits into this, by looking at that internal temperature of the planet, we're going to be able to follow up on a really intriguing discovery by the European Space Agency of what might be liquid water below the south pole of Mars. Everywhere on Earth that we found liquid water, we've also found life. So if we find liquid water at Mars, that opens up the potential for life there as well. So we want to see if it's warm enough for that area to sustain liquid water.
We got this from YouTube Live. Polybus says this is simply an amazing display of talented individuals working together. Very cool. I know, Stephanie, that this was an international effort. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So our whole laboratory has been filled with languages from around the world this past week as everyone gathered for landing. The French Space Agency, CNES, provided the seismometer, SEIS, the heat flow probe, HP cubed, that's being led by the German Space Agency, DLR, with contributions from the Swiss at ETH. And we've just got scientists all over the United States and all over the world who are eager to get their hands on this data. This is really about planet Earth exploring planet Mars.
Does that mean that we will see you signing up for a mission, a chance to live or explore Mars? Do you think you'll be one of those first people?
I would love to go to Mars. I'd also like to have a flight back. I don't know if I'm ready to make the leap. My husband might take some convincing as well.
So I want to share this from Alex again, who says, isn't it just awesome when humans tune into space and science projected on Times Square and screens across the world, just a pause from sales and selfies and awful news to reflect and realize that we as a species have maintained our curiosity and are truly evolving. So lovely closing words there from Alex, but I will give the ending word, though, to you, Stephanie. What do you hope that those selfies that it is taking send back? What are you hoping to see?
I hope that we inspire a sense of awe and wonder in people all over the world. If you see those pictures, come back on your phone. If you follow the mission at NASA Insight or us here at JPL at NASA JPL, we'll continue to tweet and share pictures and updates from the mission. This is about all of us going on a journey of exploration together. It's the best of humanity.
You can find Stephanie right here on my laptop, Stephanie L. Smith, and the NASA Insight handle right there. Thank you, Stephanie. We have to leave it there. And a reminder to our community, as always, if you have a story that you would like to see on the stream, pitch us at AJ Stream. We'll see you next time.